The United States is home to 63 beautiful national parks, and overall, I think they did a great job meticulously choosing places that deserve the highest level of federal protection. Now, there's two very different ways a place can warrant national park designation. There's parks with very rare types of resources and landscapes, and parks with outstanding natural beauty. In this video, I want to focus on the latter by talking about 10 of the most spectacular places in America that are not currently national parks. And this is not a list based off of the likelihood of said places becoming national parks in the future. However, in the next video, I do plan on talking about the 7 most likely candidates to become America's 64th national park. Unfortunately, for many of the places we'll be talking about, a promotion in its designation is exceedingly unlikely. But that doesn't mean these locations don't deserve to be highlighted as some of the most spectacular and unique places in the entire country. So let's get things started with a quick honorable mention, and that's the Black Hills National Forest in South Dakota. Now, I don't necessarily think this one needs national park status, but here's the thing. Currently, there's a national park located within the Black Hills known as Wind Cave, and while I absolutely think it deserves to be protected, I did walk away thinking it was one of the weaker national parks I'd been to. But what if I told you it didn't have to be that way at all? Surrounding Wind Cave is a diverse national forest with some of the best scenery, hiking, and wildlife anywhere in the Midwest. If you turn all of this land into a national park and made Wind Cave one of its units, I don't think I'd place this park anywhere near as low as I currently do on my national parks list. But now, onto the places that I think deserve park status all in. Number 10 is Glen Canyon National Recreation Area in Utah and Arizona. Now, the thing about Utah and Arizona is they're already some of the most well-represented states according to their national parks. And that's why Glen Canyon placed all the way down at number 10. Having said that, I actually do think it would be appropriate to redesignate this park as it has a spectacular canyon carved by the Colorado River. A national park would better protect some increasingly popular landmarks like Horseshoe Bend and potentially even Antelope Canyon. Plus, with water levels receding due to climate change, I would have no issue with this place receiving a higher level of federal protection. Number 9, Anza Borrego Desert State Park in California. This is a place I've had the opportunity to visit a handful of times now, and every time I've gone, I've been blown away by the scenery on offer. Anza Borrego is located very far south in Southern California and is so radically different from Joshua Tree that I think you could make it work. Not to mention, it covers an area so large, it's not really adequate as a state park. I'd also love to see better accessibility and paved roads to Anza Borrego's most popular landmarks, as currently you have to go on non-paved roads and have a high clearance vehicle. At the very least, I think Anza Borrego deserves a spot in the National Park Service because not enough people are aware with it being one of the most beautiful spots in Southern California. Number 8, Hells Canyon National Recreation Area, mostly in Oregon but also in Idaho. Let me start off by saying that both of these two states are some of the most underrepresented in the National Park Service. Therefore, Hells Canyon is the first of several locations in both that we'll be talking about. Interestingly, the idea of a national park here has been tossed around before. And while I've never been to Hells Canyon, I definitely think protecting the country's deepest canyon as a national park makes a lot of sense. Additionally, if you look at the current boundaries of the National Recreation Area, you'll notice that the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest is also included. I think having these two very different areas be a part of the same national park would be really awesome actually, and I even have a name suggestion. How about Heaven and Hell National Park? Heaven representing the towering snowy mountain peaks, and Hell representing the extremely dry and desolate River Gorge. Number 7, Big Sur in California. Some way, somehow, Big Sur never became a unit of the National Park Service. Instead, it's a collection of many state parks, which I don't think is anywhere near adequate enough. Now, Big Sur would be a lot higher on this list if California didn't already have so many amazing national parks. But I do still think there's more room for coastal areas to be added to the mix, especially considering Big Sur is one of the most beautiful slivers of coastline in the country, if not the world. Similar to Anza Borrego, at the very least, I'd like to see this one become a National Park Service site, but I certainly would not complain about a national park designation. Number 6, Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon. Like Hells Canyon, this one was actually also in the cards to become a national park at one point, but unfortunately Oregon got unlucky once again. However, I'd love to see this idea come to fruition as Mount Hood is one of the most prominent mountains in the Cascade Range. From what I understand, there's lots of great hiking and scenery around the mountain as well. The only obstacle is whether or not Mount Hood National Park would be different enough from Mount Rainier National Park, which is located not too far away and also protects a major mountain in the same range. I wouldn't know because I haven't seen much of it myself, but if not, perhaps National Monument designation would also be appropriate. Before we get to the top 5, if you've enjoyed this video so far, I would really appreciate if you gave it a like and subscribe to Travel Dash so you don't miss any content like this in the future. Thanks for the support, and let's move on to the 5 locations that I'm very passionate about being a national park. Number 5, Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore in Michigan. From everything I've seen and heard about Pictured Rocks, it has to be one of the most beautiful sections of coast in all of America. Now, the good news about this one is because it's already a National Park Service site, it's probably the most likely park on this list to be redesignated. And with its colorful sandstone cliffs that have been naturally sculpted into caves and arches, not to mention the unique waterfalls that flow directly into Lake Superior, I have no doubt it would be an adequate enough fit in the national parks. Especially coming off the redesignation of the Indiana Dunes, which was also formerly a national lakeshore. No offense to any fans of that place, but I think anyone that has visited both would agree that Pictured Rocks is by far more impressive. My last case for this one is I really think Michigan's Upper Peninsula is severely lacking in notoriety by the Park Service, but a Pictured Rocks National Park would most certainly help to fill that hole in my opinion. Number 4 is Sawtooth National Forest in Idaho. Of all the states out west, Idaho is the only one without a national park. Now, how do you fix that? I think giving the national park designation to the Sawtooth Mountains is a perfect way of going about this. Not only does it give Idaho some much-deserved representation in the national parks, but the Sawtooths are extraordinary for both scenery and hiking and absolutely deserve the recognition. And cracking the top 3 is Adirondack Park in New York. If you look at a map of the national parks, you'll notice a pretty big gap between the Virginias and Maine. There's 2 potential candidates that I think could round out this region. The first is the Delaware Water Gap in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, and the only reason I left that one out is because I'm planning to save it for the next video. But even more so, I think the Adirondack Mountains are well worthy of national park status, as they are home to some of the most spectacular scenery and hiking in the East. Like Anza Borrego, this park covers an enormous chunk of land that makes much more sense under the National Park Service. Plus, I just think it's kind of crazy that the state of New York doesn't have more representation. It's a beautiful state, and I think the Adirondacks are the most beautiful part. Number 2, Nepali Coast State Wilderness Park in Hawaii. You hear that? This place is understate. It's not even part of the National Park Service. And that's blatantly ridiculous because this is the most incredible coast I've ever seen in my life. Aside from the unbelievable scenery, there's so much recreational opportunity that already warrants national park status. You can hike the 11-mile Kalala Trail, which is already one of my favorite hikes I've experienced. Or you could take a helicopter or a boat to get a completely different perspective. The way I see it is I have no problem with the current 2 national parks in Hawaii being national parks. They're very cool places. But I don't think either of them can even remotely compare to how dramatic the scenery is at the Nepali coast. It's the most spectacular natural site anywhere in the state and one of the best in the country as well. However, coming in at the number 1 spot is the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area in Oregon and Washington. I've traveled to so many beautiful places across America, but of them, the Gorge is one of the first places I think of when it comes to my favorites. Heck, it's my absolute favorite one that is not a national park. Therefore, I think it's 100% deserving of the status. It's to my understanding that this was actually under consideration at one point, but due to the towns and highway located within the park, they created the National Scenic Area to strike a balance between conservation and public use. Now, I draw less of an issue with its designation as opposed to people overlooking it in favor of other national parks. It actually makes me cringe when people drive right on by to get from one national park to another only because they don't know it exists. I feel like the average American is not aware that the point of the national parks is to protect rare resources over the best natural beauty. It's just a coincidence that some of the most spectacular places in the country excel in both. But even if you just looked at resources, the Columbia River Gorge is still home to the highest concentration of waterfalls in the entire country, the largest river system in the Pacific Northwest, and one of the top 5 deepest canyons in America. So I rest my case. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.